So I've been coding with AI since late 2024 using tools like Replit and Lovable. I've been building automation since 2020. And there's one thing that even now with agentic workflows is missing, with that everybody is going to forget to do. And that's something that I'm going to describe in this video. And I'm going to give it a name, and I want this name to stick because I've been using it for a number of years, but I'm going to call it Payload Augmentation. So Payload Augmentation, what is this thing that I have made up that I am basically describing now? Payload Augmentation is, and this is from one of my free trainings, which you can probably check out in the description below. Payload Augmentation is the introduction of business context into the automation playground. It's what happens when you use GET requests to make the data pool that you have to play around with so big that you can make any automation or AI agent do exactly what you want. This has not changed for years. It's the one principle behind every single thing that I have done and I have made for clients up until this day, from even before I was doing a lot of operations and sales systems for different clients like I'm doing right now, and I was doing cold email lead generation. And I was using AI in the early days in order to personalize my emails. This is the thing that makes something worthwhile. This is the thing that makes your outputs actually good. Payload augmentation can be described in one very, very simple process, and that simple process is called trigger, read, automate. You create a trigger that is integrated into your systems quite seamlessly. You then use information pulled from that trigger to read a database or multiple databases that hold unique identifiers for assets in other systems. And you then use the combined information in order to automate, to perform CRUD actions across the map that in turn may or may not trigger their own automations that run the same process. I'm going to show you what this looks like inside of make.com and in NAN and explain it in those terms. But the simple gist of it is this. You will have a trigger. Let's say this trigger is someone filled in a type form. This could be, for example, a sales system. Let's just leave it at that. Someone fills in a type form. All right. We now have, let's say that their name is so-and-so at business.com. So it could just be name at company.com. We could basically pass this for the company name. And then what we can do is we can get the website's details. We can get the company's LinkedIn. We can then get recent news articles and stories. We can then get a bunch of posts from the executive team, and then we can color a CRM and basically fill in as many different custom fields that you can use to help personalize things as you want. So we could basically color a CRM and personalize the lead and add all of their teammates as potential people to reach out to via account-based marketing. So this here, I've just made this up. This is just an idea that I've made up. But if you follow trigger, read, automate, then you have the exact understanding of what payload augmentation is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you some examples from a couple of make automations that I've made either for myself or for different clients. First one being the thing that I use in order to generate tasks for my team. So this is one automation that it looks more complicated than it is. It's actually quite straightforward. The only thing that happens is we get a Fathom recording, which includes a client name and a transcript. From there, we grab the entire team from our database, which is used as our project management system. We then grab all of the active tasks. We then grab all of the clients that are active. That gives us all clients, all tasks, and all team members. We then funnel all of that information over here into OpenRouter to generate an outline of the recording and then create tasks, which we then pass in JSON to the Airtable in order to create things based on an SOP that we've spent hours upon hours upon hours getting correct. And you can see here inside of this XML, which I've used to format, which I've used as formatting for this post or for this open router request, this is the available context that it has. When you run those GET requests, you can grab all of this information the same way that we did. So that's one example of payload augmentation, and I'm going to show you a couple more. The second one, this one here, comes from, this is a really simple one, and we did this one for a client because it fulfills a very necessary need that a lot of people are always looking for. So these guys do content creation, and they fill in the social media managers will fill in a form to determine the type of content that needs to be created so that the editors know exactly what they need to do when they're making the edits that need to be done. It starts off with a video form with a record ID and the content alongside of it. We then grab the form fill, and that gives us this here, which is, you know, the name, the content pillar, the priority, the date, the notes, a bunch of stuff about the content. Then we grab the actual video in and of itself, which comes from a link that's happened between frame.io and the Airtable. From there, we can determine if the item is a piece of video or if it's a graphic. And if it's a graphic, we'll then grab the teammate who's been assigned. So, and you can see here how big this payload is getting. It started off tiny here, and then it grew to this, then it grew to those two plus this, then it grew to those two plus these two, then it grew to this entire list here. This is the essence of payload augmentation. You're increasing the size of this data pool so that these messages can be as intricate as humanly possible. You can see the different types of things that we can drag in here. We have video name, we have the ID of the video, we have the assignee, including the ID of their Slack tag, or including their Slack user ID. Then we have the due date, and we have in the thread extra information that we've grabbed from the form fill, including the complexity of the piece of content that needs to be made, the priority, the content format, and any notes that have been added as well. This in and of itself is something that if you just forget to do, or you just don't realize this is a requirement, you will always have secondary outputs. I'm going to show you another example, which is a little bit more brief inside of NAN of exactly this same principle. It starts off here. This basically takes the onboarding call transcript and turns it into a brand guidelines, a set of brand guidelines. All we're doing is we're using this webhook here, or the output from this webhook, to get a client record from the exact same form. If it's an AI transcript, it goes up there. If it's a raw recording, we'll just download it and do what we need to do, but we're not doing that because they're always going to give us a transcript. Then we're cleaning up the transcription. Then we're grabbing the type of task that's required. We're grabbing the client's information, and then we're generating a new task. Then we're generating the brand guidelines, and then we're creating that, and then we're creating a quick plan, and then we're sending that stuff over to Slack. Trigger, read, automate. Trigger, read, automate. If you forget everything about everything that I'm talking to you about right now, trigger, read, automate is the only thing that you need to remember. And if you take heed of this message, every single output that you will have will be better than it would be if you didn't do this. Now, if we go back here and we take a look at what this could look like in the world of agentic workflows, well, what are some of the things that you can do for payload augmentation inside of an agentic workflow? For agentic workflows, let's take a look. Now, the first place that most people are going to go, which is one of the more obvious ones, is RAG. If I have a vector store, so I can say RAG/vector store. If I have a vector store of information about whatever it is that I'm looking for, then I can do very well to grab the information that I need when I need it. That's the first thing. Very, very easy. There are some limitations to RAG. RAG can sometimes fall apart in certain particular places. For example, if taking things in chunks always leaves context out, and not understanding the specific chunks based on the search that you're doing in order to generate those chunks, basically leads to a situation where all of the things that you are looking for, you're only looking for in bits and bobs. But if you had the entirety of, let's say this was a conversation or a transcript from Fathom, or a book, for example, if you could put an entire book in there instead of chapter by chapter, then you could see how everything intertwines, and you can actually go through and synthesize the information that's being provided way more efficiently. So RAG has its errors, and this is the first place people look, which is why it's the first place to talk about insofar as generating payload augmentation for agentic workflows. The second one's pretty easy. It's .md files. Now, .md files are the markdown files that you will find when you are inside of your code base. Now, considering we're using the directives and execution framework for a lot of the stuff that we're doing, this is always going to show up in the directives folder. This here is an example of some .md files, and all it's doing is it's showing you what the purpose is of the specific tool. It's showing you how this tool is being orchestrated, showing you how this tool is being configured, how it's being downloaded, how it's being started, and the output requirements are also embedded inside of a lot of these .md files as well. Another .md file you're always going to find is agents.md or Claude.md, and these are global principle-led pieces of information that you can use in order to generate any agentic workflow, and it will always contain a specific 3-layer architecture because this is the way that this is being designed right now. It will talk about self-annealing, it will talk about deliverables, it will talk about deployment, it will talk about different endpoints and how they need to be managed, and the rest as well. So this is another example that can basically be used in order to make your payload augmentation as good as it could be, which includes the Claude.md file and your directives. But I'm going to add another one here. And this one is something that is it's kind of annoying that this isn't being spoken about a lot, but it's literal documentation taken from your business. Now, what do I mean by this? Every single person who runs, for example, a service-based business, you could be an accountant, you could be a lawyer, you could do what I do and do AI automation and helping people put sales systems into their businesses and operation systems into their businesses. You could be a carpenter, who knows, whatever it could be, right? You're going after someone. You have an ideal client profile. If you are doing anything creative with your agentic workflows and you do not have an ideal client profile, and a very loose one, a general one, if you don't have that inside of any of your .md files, you are wasting a bunch of time. Now, I will always put these in a folder called references. And inside the references, you can have, you can have ideal client profiles. I'll just call it ICPs. You can have information about offers, and you can have information about personas. Now, what's the difference between personas and ICPs here? A persona is a slice of the ideal client profile. The ideal client profile is really good when it comes to, I want to find this specific person from a literal perspective if I was going to look them up on something like Apollo insofar as databases are concerned. Personas are more psychographic than demographic. And I'll show you some examples of personas. So this is Poppy. This is an AI agent that is specifically for people who want to create a bunch of stuff insofar as content or ads or whatever it may be. A lot of copywriters will use Poppy in order to generate some of the things that they need to generate. It's pretty simple. It's just you have these buckets which are text files and places where you can put YouTube videos and Snapchats and TikToks and Instagram Reels, etc., and different Facebook ads to generate something that you can then speak to through a chat, which you can just connect via dots. It's basically just a massive RAG. So that's basically what that means. Now, when I talk about personas are the individual scenarios that describe certain aspects of your ideal client profile. I have 30, and these 30 are being used as essentially as pillars to generate certain elements of content, so that I always have something new to talk about, or I always have a new slice of my ideal client profile to talk about. So here I've got the administrative prisoner, the person spending 15 to 20 hours per week on administrative tasks, the context switching victim, the person who starts every Monday planning to focus on sales and content creation, but by Tuesday afternoon buried in fulfillment, The motion without progress operator, my calendar shows I'm working 60 hours per week, but when I actually audit my time, only 12 hours are spent on money making activities and the rest is operational chaos designed as productivity, disguised as productivity. And you can see how it continues going, and it's divided into different concepts as well. There's a persona. I added a mechanism here, but I don't really need the mechanisms. So you can add all of these personas as different things to add to your .md files. And this can be used and referenced by any agents and agentic workflows that you build that are responsible for generative context or generative content. If you're building things out that are meant to speak to specific people, you need to know how to speak to them and what to speak to them about. And the final element of references is preferences. It's probably the best way to pronounce it. It's probably the best way to describe it. Preferences includes writing styles. It includes recording styles. It's all of the bits of iterations that you've done on the thing that you do manually that you want to now bring into an agentic workflow that you are not currently doing, or you don't currently have a way of introducing into what's currently inside of here. Because if you have an agentic workflow that is generating, let's say, Twitter and LinkedIn content, and it's going through a quote unquote human in the loop process where it gives you the preview and then you just give it your comments and it redoes it based on your comments, you're going to want to save some of those preferences, and you're going to want to make sure that it gets it to a position where it's actually worth looking into, because there's a concept called emergence which describes this is worth going into because it's actually quite interesting. So this is a David Deutsch thing, and David Deutsch is a theoretical physicist. I'm not going to go into who he is. He's just super smart. Just take it as that. But the concept of emergence is when you have something made up of a bunch of smaller parts, when you clump all of the smaller parts into a whole, they will start to give off factors and ideas and feelings and lag measures that are not indicative of the individual elements of it. So for example, a brick. Let's say the Great Wall of China. The Great Wall of China is bricks. It's bricks, and it's concrete and cement and bricks. Those three things, when combined, create the Great Wall of China. But when people think about the Great Wall of China, they think about a historical monument. They think about something that's so sturdy that nothing can break it. They think about this, they think about that, they think about, I don't know, Trump, who knows? Like, there's a bunch of different things that cannot be predicted by its constituent parts that are generated from the whole. If you have no understanding, if your agentic workflows have no understanding of the preferences that are needed in order to make the outputs as good as they could be, then the problems that you're going to run into are where it gets 19 different things wrong, and because of that, you scrap it in the first place. So if you hold the preferences there, you will get 90% of the way there, and all of the small issues that are going to come up when it comes to getting this right in the first place, or the small human in the loop errors where it's, oh, that's great, but just you've put M dashes in here, just forget the M dashes, or the concept here is really good, you just need to make sure that you tighten it a little bit more, reduce it by like 300 characters. If those are the things that are being said in this human in the loop process, then you're in a good position. But if you're getting absolute nonsense, then you're failing from point one, you're experiencing negative emergence in that sense, and you are usually failing at the point where you don't have enough references. So these are some of the best ways in order to get payload augmentation to work for agentic workflows. The final thing, and this is less so about what's stored inside of the code base in and of itself, but more so what's being used outside that is being brought in, is MCPs for databases. If you have an MCP for your project management system, which let's say it's built in Airtable, so we can say one example is Airtable. If you have a specific table in Airtable that always gets updated whenever there's new things occurring, and you know that you have an MCP that you can hook into your cursor, and you just want to be able to use it and speak to it so that you can get certain things done inside of Airtable or pull from Airtable, then that means that you can have things happening externally, live, real time, without your need to be involved in the process. those things can be introduced into the entirety of the context window alongside your ideal client profiles and your offers and your preferences and your personas. And those things will altogether be used in order to generate the exact output that you're going to want to generate. So that's Airtable as an example. Another example is Supabase. And Supabase is just a bit more heavy duty than Airtable. It's, go away. What are you doing? Move. It is Postgres in its clearest form. And the biggest difference between this and this is that Airtable is not going to manage millions of rows of anything. And with Supabase, you're going to need to query it using SQL queries, as opposed to Airtable, where you could just use their REST API, which is just a way which is a set standardized way to generate, to get specific records or search for specific records. We could say REST API, we could also call it search records steps. So these are the ways that you are going to be able to introduce business context into any particular agentic workflow that you're building. And if you don't have a combination of some, or all of these, then the outputs are going to be trash and you need to do better. And if you can't think of any way to generate payload augmentation for your agent right now, the best piece of advice I could say, start writing down stuff. Start writing down everything. Start writing more SOPs, start writing down how you do things, talk to Claude a lot more, generate some Claude projects, because those Claude projects will then generate more text that you can then use in different ways, shapes and forms in order to generate more information that can be used, that you can put into a lot of these agentic workflows so that you can enable payload augmentation. So to summarize, trigger, read, automate. You need to be able to trigger this, usually in this case with an agentic workflow from a chat. The agent in and of itself needs to be able to read items and information, necessary items and information that are going to give it a better output, and then automate is the proliferation and the running of all of the executions that are inside of your executions folder. So that's a brief overview of what payload augmentation is. Trigger, read, automate. If you forget this, I will find you and I will slap you in the back of your head, because this is the one thing that you need to know if you want to make anything that's worth anything. So there's more videos on exactly how this looks in NAN and Make and all of my other build outs. There's a bunch of trainings in the description below to describe exactly how this looks, and I will talk to you soon.